Happy Friday, everybody. It is the Clean Hits podcast. I don't know if you guys noticed, but all week we have been talking about prospects and ranking prospects. And today we're going to dive in deeper and go into all of the Utah Hockey Club's prospects, position by position, kind of talk through this depth chart. Of course, these are going to be players who have not played 25 or more games in the NHL. So some of these players may have had their cup of coffee, but definitely haven't had the full lunch and the full, experience of a quarter of an NHL season or so. I am your host, Brad. We got Clean Hits Corey here. We got Trent as well. How are you guys doing?
Good, man. Doing good.
Nice.
Yeah, it's Friday. Can't complain. It's Friday. The dog days, the doldrums of the off season are marching along, and I feel like before you know it, rookie camp's going to start.
I know. I feel it knocking on the door. Corey, it looks like you are in Utah. Love that.
Just live from the Delicate Arch here. Got a Utah trip kind of in the planning process for hopefully for the home opener, and awesome. This is going to be one of the stops for the trip. So just getting fired up for that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, before we jump into just talking about kind of these prospects and how we all personally kind of rank them, I asked everybody in the team to submit their list, and I kind of put them together in a way that made sense with how everybody's been ranking those prospects by position. But I wanted to pose the question because I can't believe how many times I put AHL for what team that prospect is going to be on next season. And when we go through this, you're going to see that list is pretty massive. And I wanted to pose the question, could this be the best AHL team that this franchise has had? So some of the names that are going to be coming onto the team are going to be guys like Matica, Lutz, Lipkin is going to make the roster. Duda is going to make the roster. We wrote a piece about him on the Clean Hits Substack. Then we still have the potential of Josh Doan being down there, and we still have contributors like Kolyachonok and Soderstrom on that roster that are kind of veterans of the AHL at this point, but still young enough to maybe make an impact on the NHL team, maybe continue their growth as a player. This is a very, very exciting roster. And I mean, I'm excited to go down to Tucson and catch a couple games this season just for that sheer amount of kind of second and third round picks that are going to be integrating onto this team. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that there was a couple additional names there too. Noel Nord, yes. Third round pick. We've got Maverick Lamora, who's going to be down there as well. And then
I can't believe I forgot him.
Yeah, the list is too long. Max Zuber. So I think there's going to be like a lot of really like legit NHL potential prospects down there, which is huge. I don't know if it'll be the best team that we've had. I think we've had some farm teams that have had some decent on ice success, but I think it might be the brightest future we've had down there in terms of just like legitimate potential NHLers, potential impact NHLers all on the farm at one time. The sheer volume of them is really impressive. I think this organization has had a bad habit of rushing prospects, and dealing or losing too many picks in the interim, abandoning rebuilds quickly. And I think it's left our farm teams without a whole lot of very young, very exciting firepower for the most part. They've largely been like veteran teams or prospects kind of on last legs kind of thing, which sometimes can contribute to a good playoff run down there. But I'm not sure that we've had a point in time where we can look and see, half a dozen or 9 or more kids that have real potential to make roles for themselves on the NHL club in the near future. So I think it's an exciting time for Tucson. And like you, Brad, I can't wait to get down there. I'm way out here in Gilbert, so I'm half the way down there anyway. So we can meet up and carpool. You just come here and I'll drive the rest of the way. Yeah.
Yeah. When I think of Tucson now, I just think there's hope, right? And for a long time with the Coyotes farm team, that wasn't the case. Like Trent said, there was a lot of hangers on. There was a lot of those veterans who were hanging around in North America, just looking to get a couple more pro paychecks, or there'd be 1 or 2 kind of mid to high level prospects, and then just kind of a mishmash of everything else. But like you said, there's 8, 9, 10 guys with really high potential with a chance to make the NHL someday. And usually when the NHL team is bad, the farm team is good. But in the Coyotes' case, usually both were bad. And
That's true.
we finally have the development system in place. Before they got some decent prospects, but there was really no development coaches and all these other things in place to really bring those prospects along. They were rushed to the NHL. They didn't have those kind of interim coaches like Lee Stempniak, who were really helping them develop and get them to the next level. Now all that infrastructure is in place. It's just another piece of what Bill Armstrong is starting to do here with this Utah team.
Yeah, I remember the days where being excited about Lucas Lessio and Andy Neely was something I was excited about, but a long time ago. And we were kind of discussing before we went live with the show, but there was that really fantastic run by the Roadrunners a couple seasons ago when we did have some big name prospects like Lawson Krause and Dylan Strome on that team. But even when we were kind of looking up and down that lineup, that still was kind of consumed by veterans for the most part. I think Garland was on the team, but wasn't blossoming into the player that he kind of became. But outside of that, yeah, I mean, last year the team was very solid, and I think we're probably going to have a little bit more bumps in the road because there's going to be so many kids integrating on the team. But regardless, I mean, if you want to start looking at prospects and scouting what's coming up the pipeline, Tucson Roadrunners are going to be the place to do that, because you are going to have essentially a gluttony of our players that we've drafted in the late first round, second round, third rounds, and beyond on that roster, contributing on that roster up and down the lineup. It's going to be pretty exciting. And if those kids can really make the jump this year, watch out, because this is going to be a stacked team. But even that more so will be how this team competes in the following seasons and beyond that. So very exciting times, which kind of leads us right into our topic of today, which is going to be discussing that prospect pipeline. But first, if you have not already, make sure that you're subscribing to cleanhits.substack.com. That's where all of our written material is. This week, we started kind of our prospects showcase. So Trent's written 2 pieces on 1 through 10 of the prospects. And then I started a piece for all the players that are 25 years or younger. So we're just kind of highlighting those players, giving you a nice little player profile on them. So if you want to learn a little bit more about some of the young, exciting guys that were coming up through the pipeline. Of course, this is the house that general manager Bill Armstrong has built. There's a lot of size. You will start to see that as a theme as you read through those articles. So yeah, make sure you are subscribed to the Clean Hits Substack at cleanhits.substack.com. You can find us on Twitter/X at Clean Hits Hockey. You can find us on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple now. We are up and running. You can find these shows everywhere. Make sure you give us a like, subscribe, leave a comment. We love engaging with you guys. Just say what's up. We also have t-shirts. If you want a t-shirt, just shout us out a message. We can probably find a way to make that work. It looks great on you guys. Thank you for wearing those. And if you are joining us live on the stream right now, make sure you pop some questions that you may have in the comments. We love answering those as we move along. So first off, without further ado, let's talk about the center position for that prospect pipeline. Again, I made some nice clean charts to go with the branding, if you will. And I'm just going to pull that up to the screen. If you're unable to watch live, don't worry. We're going to be kind of talking through these names. But we're going through the top 4 prospects by position, starting off with that center position. And of course, we have Mr. Cole Baudouin on the top of this list. If you did not catch our interview with him last week, make sure you do. It's in that YouTube account or both of our podcast sites as well. Great kid, phenomenal answers and responses to all the questions, especially some of those hard-hitting questions like if you can outbench Bill Armstrong. But this is a guy I think we're all very excited about. This is a two-way centerman, just an athletic, physical specimen. I think this is going to be one of the players I am going to be following very closely throughout this season as he continues his career in the juniors. But you never know. This is a type of kid that could be kind of like Jacob Chikrin, where he comes into training camp. He's getting into a pro build already, and maybe he turns enough heads to where he actually makes the team for a couple games and then gets sent back, or maybe he'll just go right back to the juniors for development. But he's also going to be auditioning for that World Juniors roster. I believe he had a goal today, along with Tija Ginla, who had 2 goals today, which again, very exciting stuff. Thank you, Bill Armstrong. But what are you guys' thoughts on this list? Further down, we have Jonathan Castagna, who's in the NCAA. He was selected in 2023 in the 3rd round. Samu Bao, who is at the age of 20, a 6th round pick in the Finnish league. And then Tanner Lutke, who was selected in the 3rd round of the 2023 and is in the NCAA as well.
Yeah, I think when you begin with Cole Baudouin there, just a lot of excitement already with what he's doing at the Hockey Canada camp. And it looks a lot like his past performances with Hockey Canada, where, you know, he kind of starts more toward the bottom of the list and then really ramps up, where toward the end of the tournament or the camp, he looks like one of the better players. I think Tija Ginla is a pretty safe bet to make the World Junior team. And now I think Cole Baudouin has really upped his odds of making that team. This is going to be a big year for him and Barrie. You know, overall, this list, I love the Sergachev addition, but the Connor Geeky subtraction from this list is probably the biggest thing. He would be number 1 if he was still part of this organization, but still looking at the rest of it, Cole Baudouin is a solid pick. And the other player who really stands out in my mind is Samu Bauer. You know, just Finnish players, they're solid. They don't really do anything stupid on the ice. They're solid. They're trustworthy. And he's a big dude. He's like 6'4", 210, I believe, and still growing because he's only 19, I want to say. So a lot of promise with him as well.
Yeah, surprise, another large center drafted by Bill Armstrong.
Yeah, and Bao was on the Finnish U20 team in the last World Junior Championship as a shutdown center. So he's like the Finnish Stenlund, I think, a little bit. He's got that potential to be a shutdown center. He's got a physical side to him too. He may up his offensive game a little bit, so he might be like another Jack McBain waiting in the wings, but this time from Europe. So that kind of profile. For me, there's a couple interesting players right in the middle here. Our 2 NCAA players, Tanner Lutke and Jonathan Castagna, both of whom had better freshman seasons than I expected. Really good freshman seasons. Lutke played in 40 games and had 28 points for the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Didn't get a whole lot of credit because he's on kind of an unheralded team. Castagna, on the other hand, was drafted a little bit earlier in the 3rd round, had a little bit more of a reputation headed into the year. He had 25 points in 35 games at Cornell, who did make the tournament, and he played very, very well as a 2-way center in the NCAA tournament. He really, really impressed me there and really rose to the occasion as the games got hard and made life very difficult on the opposition in a variety of ways. He's a big, strong kid too. He made a bit of a unique jump too. This year, the kid that Boston drafted 1 spot after we took Baudouin, right? We famously jumped up and stole Baudouin right out of their grasp, the Boston Bruins, and they were left to take Dean Letourneau, who's actually a kid I expected us to be interested in because he was teammates with Jonathan Castagna in Castagna's draft year, not this last season, but the season before at St. Andrews College. Despite it being called a college, it is a prep school, a high school in Canada. And at St. Andrews, because Letourneau had a big year and was slated to play in the USHL next season, which would have been a typical path. And that's what a lot of people expected Castagna to do as well, to go from prep school to USHL, which is American juniors, and then go to the NCAA. Letourneau ended up jumping early. His university had some kids sign. They had some openings. They needed some help. And a lot was made of, can Dean Letourneau make that big of a jump? How do you go from prep school right into Division I? It's too hard. Is this going to be bad for his development? And I found it ironic because Castagna had just done the same thing. He had gone straight from St. Andrews College right into the NCAA and had a phenomenal season. And he's just the forgotten man. I guess that's the difference between a kid picked in the 1st round and a kid picked in the 3rd round is Castagna is a little bit more unheralded. But I think that with those two and Bao, even though we don't have Geeky and we don't really have that high-end, shiny top 1C potential prospect, I think we have some really useful, hardworking, 200-foot in your face center depth that's got real NHL potential.
Yeah, and as you start to look down the winger depth, when we start to get through that, you're going to see that even if you may not have the highest offensive upside, when you're surrounded with some of these types of wingers that we're going to be talking about, it may not matter. Another note that I wanted to make on Castagna is, wasn't he the guy who maxed out all the combine metrics in his draft year, just like Baudouin did this year? Yeah. So two times in a row, the scouting and management staff decided, hey, that guy just went through hell and back at the combine and topped out in the top 5 in just nearly about every activity there. And that's the guy we want.
Yeah, and I'd say it's almost 3 times in a row, because Maverick Lamoureux was really high up on a lot of those results in his combine too. He was a combine standout. Castagna was really popular in the interviews too. He interviews really well. If you ever have a chance to go to YouTube and check out some Castagna interviews, he is not your typical meathead jock hockey player. He's gives really thoughtful answers. He's an interesting kid.
Very cool. Any final thoughts on that center depth, Corey? I'm glad you mentioned that subtraction of Connor Geekie, and this list would look a lot different with him still on it. But I think ultimately made that Baudouin draft pick make a lot more sense, and luckily we were able to grab him to kind of help fuel that part of the pipeline to be able to make the move to bring in a top defenseman like that.
Yeah, I think that's just it. If you want a piece like Sergachev, you got to pay a high price. And as much as we liked Cooley and how important he was to that center position, that was the price we had to pay. But at the same time, we brought in a very high-end defenseman who's going to be immediately the best defenseman on this team. And he fits in with the rest of the core of this group age-wise, right? Keller, Krause, Nick Schmaltz, he's the same age. It's all going to fit together really well.
Yep. And then real quick shout out to Tyson Cole, our Canuck Army friend, daily face-off writer. Thanks for tuning in, bud. Always love chatting with you. And I love that Connor Garland has a little place in your heart as well. So thanks for the comment. All right, moving right along. Left wings. I'm sorry, I grabbed the left defense. I may need to re-upload that. So while we'll use that, why don't we just pivot right over to right wings for now? At the top of this list, we have Josh Doan, which may come as a surprise because I think a lot of Utah fans and Arizona fans alike are kind of penciling him in to be an NHL contributor this year. On one of our shows a couple weeks ago, we are not as certain about that. We still have a lot of depth at the wing, especially with guys like Michael Carcone still there. And there's still room for improvement for Josh and things for him to learn in the AHL. So right now I have him slotted as an AHL/NHLer. He was a second round pick in that 2021 draft. Next up, we do have Mikko Matika. Some also pronounce his name Matika. We are trying to actively figure out the perfect way to pronounce that, or his preferred way, but we have definitely heard both. He had a phenomenal season in Denver University last year in the NCAA. I was lucky enough to get to see them play against ASU, and the kid has a shot. I mean, it's just undeniable what he can bring. Another, guess what, gigantic winger. Skates like the wind, finds empty ice, finds space, finds lanes, and then just pummels the goalie with his shot. Is a really underrated prospect in my mind. Third on this list is Aku Ratu, who has made his name in the Tucson Roadrunners organization for quite a while now and has been a solid contributor for them and even got a sniff in the NHL at the very tail end of the season this year. And then finally, we have the newly acquired Igor Sokolov, who is coming from the Ottawa Senators organization. Another player, another large winger who got to sniff the NHL this season, a former second-round draft pick from that famous 2020 draft class. He will be going right to the Tucson Roadrunners as well. And again, he may be one of those guys that can really impress at training camp. And it's a guy that Josh Doan is going to have to kind of play very well in order to kind of take that roster spot from him. So any initial thoughts here on that right wing depth?
I mean, I'm still pretty steadfast that Josh Doan is going to make this team in Utah. I'm not too concerned about Michael Carcone. I mean, 21 goals last year, but the reality is before that he had only 6 career goals. So I'm still of the thinking that he's more likely to be a 5-goal scorer than a 20-goal scorer every year in the future. I mean, who knows? But
yeah,
really not willing to sacrifice a season of Josh Doan for Michael Carcone, who's, I believe, 28 years old now. So if we have to lose him on waivers, I'm not too concerned about that. Especially you look at the depth we're going to have in Tucson. If we have to lose Michael Carcone, I'm not too concerned about that. I think Josh Doan's going to make the team. Like you said, Ratu, really interesting debut last year. Gets to play in that last ever game in Arizona.
Yes.
Got an assist too, which was kind of under the radar with everything else happening. But yeah, really impressive list. Sokolov, great story there. Gets passed over twice in the draft, then gets picked in the second round, and the third time he's eligible. Really great size. I think, depending on injuries, that sort of thing this year, he could get a chance to play in Utah, maybe some spot duty. So yeah, really impressed with the depth we have at this position as well.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head, Brad, that Doan has got some competition in camp. I'm with Corey. I think probably he'll make the team. But I think that Sokolov and Carcone are really the key competition for him in that regard. So I think that Sokolov makes things interesting with his big, heavy shot. He can really fill the net with goals. He's the leading goal scorer in the history of the Belleville Senators. He scored 46 goals in 52 games in his last season in the QMJHL. And I heard him bragging on a podcast recently that he got himself down to a trim 224, which is his lightest fighting weight yet. He's a big, nasty kid. And I think he's coming into the season in great shape. He was spending time with Matty Nickel, who next to Gary Roberts probably is the most famous and effective trainer for NHL players. So he's obviously committed. And he seems to recognize that this is make or break. So he's going to come into camp with some fire in his belly. Whereas Michael Carcone kind of is coming off a 20-goal season, might be feeling a little bit comfortable. And Josh Doan, of course, is maybe got a little bit of happy to be here energy. So if there's a dark horse in this group, I think it's Sokolov, who might just come up and grab a spot and dare anyone to take it from him. I don't know if there's anyone bigger on the team, so they may be in tough to snatch a roster spot out of his clutches. I think that long-term, though, Doan is kind of the star of the show there on that list, with Ratu maybe having maybe a little bit questionable long-term upside on the team, a little bit of a dark horse. He's the less famous of the two Ratu brothers. I agree with you that Matica, I'm going with Matica because that's what the Denver University broadcaster calls him, is kind of my favorite undercover prospect on there. It doesn't get enough credit. That whenever I watch him play, he looks like an elite top end, blue chip type prospect, like more like a first round type prospect, but he never gets that hype at all. And
size too.
Yeah. And great size, great skating. He's a bully out there. The shot's phenomenal. I think it could just be he never really sticks around. He kind of was in Finland for a year, then he was in the USHL for a year, then he was in Division I for a year, and now he's going to be in the AHL. He's just kind of like, he's always a rookie in every league he's in, right? He's always the new guy. So I wonder if maybe that's part of the reason why he's a little less heralded, and the fact that he had some injuries pre-draft that led to him falling to the third round. Maybe has kept him a little undercover, but I don't think he will be for long because he's very impressive on the ice when you watch him play.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I really think he's going to be one of those players that everybody just goes, where the hell did that guy come from? My jaw was dropping when I got to see him play live, but
sneaky fan.
Yeah, and again, I think Sokolov is a great addition to that Roadrunners team, or potentially making the big club. You got to imagine he's going to be one of the first guys that gets called up if there are injuries. And kind of as we mentioned before, we are integrating a lot of young players onto that AHL squad. So he's a guy who's been there before. He's produced in that league. So he's maybe going to be kind of the star of the show in Tucson this year, especially if Doan's on the big club, or maybe that's going to be kind of that 1-2 punch down there. Again, started off the show talking about how exciting Tucson's going to be. And I really cannot wait to watch this team, this young squad, and seeing some of those players develop on it. Quick shout out before we move to left wings to Marshall. Thank you so much for tuning in. He agrees with us. Utah definitely has a bright future with these young players they have. Again, thanks for chiming in. Thanks for watching. If anybody else has questions or comments, please drop them as we do this stream. We'd love to just keep on engaging with you and keep on growing this community. And otherwise, let's move on to
while you're plugging things, I'd like to plug some stuff that's not our own, but for fans who are interested in following along, as this is a prospect heavy podcast, and we're talking about how amazing Tucson's going to be. Brad, you and I are driving down there, hopefully a few times this upcoming season, but that's not the only way you can watch. There's strong rumors out there that you're going to be able to watch AHL games on Flow Hockey this year, which is exciting because that's how you can watch the United States National Team Development Program play against the USHL and watch all your USHL hockey. So for all you draft nerds, that's exciting news. You may be able to catch the Roadrunners and the USHL on one streaming service. You add to that your CHL streaming service and the fact that MHL, the Russian Junior League games, are for free on YouTube. And suddenly you're going to be able to keep an eye on most of these guys we're talking about and follow along all year while you're also getting brushed up on your draft knowledge for the 2025 entry draft.
Yep. Fantastic plug, and a great way to lose all your friends and significant others when you're watching hockey for 5 hours a day like we do sometimes.
That's
it. All right, let's move on to the left wing. Again, the winger position is stacked, and the rich definitely got richer for the Utah Hockey Club here, because in this past draft, I guess you probably know this already, but 6 overall, Utah took with their first ever pick in an NHL draft, Tej Iginla. Fantastic prospects. You'll notice something that really pops out here is that he's still only 17 years old. He has a birthday in 2 days. So August 4th, happy birthday to you, Tej, coming right up. He will be most likely back in the WHL this season, but going down this list, we also have Daniil But, who is the, guess what, gigantic Russian winger that kind of goes along with that theme that Bill Armstrong and crew love to draft. Then we have Julian Lutz, who will be making his AHL debut this season, and Sam Lipkin, who will also be making his AHL debut. Lutz was a second-round pick in that 2022 draft, where Lipkin was a seventh-round pick in the 2021 draft, who has just played phenomenally his entire NCAA career. Won the Frozen Four tournament 2 seasons ago. Is just kind of one of those players coach guys that just does all the right things, plays the role he is asked to play without any sort of questions, and still manages to produce. So again, this may be undisputably the deepest position we have as far as the prospect depth goes. Lots of exciting names here. And again, as I mentioned before, when you're talking about all these kind of centers who have a lot of two-way play and maybe not the highest upside, when you surround them with these guys to the left and right of them, I mean, all you have to do is kind of hand the puck over and make sure you're playing responsibly and screen the net. And a lot of these guys are going to be able to take care of business. So thoughts on the left wing depth, thoughts on some of these names you see here?
I think, you look at this roster, Dylan Guenther probably has the best natural shot, but how long is that? How long is he going to hold that moniker when we have Tej Iginla in that shot? He can score from anywhere on the ice. He's probably not very far away from the NHL, to be honest. I think he's going to go back to Kelowna for a year, and he's probably going to follow the similar development path to Guenther, where he'll spend a little bit of time in Utah. He'll go down for the juniors. He'll play a little bit in the AHL, and then he'll come up the NHL full time. 62 goals, I believe it was last year, spread over all the different places he played. So that, like I said, he can score from anywhere. He's got that quick release. Look at his father, the type of goal scorer he was, and it's very similar to that. Don't know if he's going to be a left wing long term. I think if he can become a center, that really helps with the previous chart we looked at with the center depth. If he can move into the middle of the ice. Who else was on that list? Daniil But. He gets bigger every time we hear about it, right? I think he's got probably up to 7 feet by now.
I keep on telling this kid, you don't need the insoles. You're tall enough already, man.
Exactly. I think that's going to be a player who's going to bypass Tucson, especially he's already playing in the pro league in Russia. He's a player who, especially in Russia, the young players don't get a lot of ice time, but toward the end of the year, he was getting more and more responsibility. I think he's going to play one more year there. I believe that's when his contract up. He'll come over to North America. He'll make the immediate jump to Utah, and he will slot in on that left side. So lots of excitement coming. Sam Lipkin as well, really exciting prospect. 7th round selection, so incredible value there, and had a really good performance at the World Juniors with Team USA as well, which I think it was just after that he got his contract as well. So lots of promise there on the left side.
Yeah, I think Lipkin, if Doan does end up down in Tucson, it'll be a reunion. They were teammates for the Chicago Steel. That team was an absolute powerhouse down there. That was when I first really got good looks at the Fantilli brothers, Adam Fantilli, and some really epic battles. There's a great rivalry in the USHL between the Chicago Steel and the US 18s. And that year it was Logan Cooley and Cutter Gauthier and Rucker McGroarty going head-to-head against Fantilli and Lipkin and Doan and some of those Chicago Steel players. And it was like the WWF there. Some nights it was like the people's elbow coming off the top rope. Things would get wild in that rivalry series. And Sam Lipkin was playing center, I believe, at the time, and was an absolute stalwart shutdown player. With some really great offensive upside in the USHL. That last season, he had 71 points in 59 USHL games, and he kept his production level very, very high. He was over a point per game in his career in the NCAA at a powerhouse Quinnipiac team, which gets a reputation for being an extremely old team, very much a mature group of players. So for him to come in as a freshman and take a job and have a starring role on a championship team at his age is really impressive, especially for a 7th round pick. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for him. Daniil Boot, Bill Armstrong takes a lot of flack for, his fish stories with these guys. Every time they get a little bigger, he mentions them. But I think he was vindicated a little bit at that Milstein camp. Simishev measured in at 6'5" and a half. And I believe BA was taking flack for saying he thought he might be 6'6" when his draft profile said he was 6'4". Well, he was exaggerating by only half an inch. And I think Boot was listed at 6'6" in his draft year. And BA said, I wouldn't be surprised if he's 6'7" or even 6'8" at some point. He took a little heat for that. Well, I saw him in the handshake line with Salayev, who did measure at 6'6", and I'm telling you, Boot was taller. He was a little bit taller than him. So I do think that he's at least 6'6" and a half or 6'7". So I think that BA's wild exaggerations are maybe overstated, and these kids are going to be darn big. Daniel Boot is a dual threat offensive player. He skates like no man his size should skate. And I don't just mean high-end speed and power. I mean, he can dangle and break ankles. He's slippery. It's unreal when you watch him. It's like a create a player mode on a video game. Someone just jacked everything all the way up to 10 on him. And he is a right-hand shot who plays on his off wing. That's very common in Russia. He may stay there, or he may switch over to the right side here in North America. You never can tell. So really good winger depth there. Julian Lutz is a little bit unheralded. He had a lot of injuries in his draft year. He had an amazing U18 tournament in Ivan Hlinka. He fell to the 2nd round. He didn't play much. He had a hard time getting playing time at a top program in the German men's league. So he came over to the USHL. He was a little bit older for a USHL player. He was very productive, but you would kind of expect that given his draft pedigree and age. I was hoping he might, go the NCAA route if he was eligible. He did end up turning pro. He will be in the AHL along with Matica and Noel Nord and a lot of these other wingers that we're also excited about. So bright future for Lutz. He's shown many flashes over his career of top-end talent for yet another pretty big kid. So we'll see if he can really entrench himself and stand out from this very crowded pack of very talented players. It's inevitable that some talented players are going to get a little bit lost in the shuffle. Hopefully not, but we'll see who it is and whether it's Lutz.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. At some point, there's not enough roster spots, which always made that Tej selection very interesting. And I think when we start talking about the defense depth, it's going to be some questions about if Winger was the right choice there or not, best player available, drafting strategies rather than filling in complete gaps. And again, we'll have that conversation in a minute here. But real quickly, wanted to point out another comment from our viewers, Third Gen Aggie. What are the chances Tej ends up at center? I know there's some talk to that end. Corey touched on it. He sounds like it's going to be a position that they put him in if he goes back to juniors this season, and something that they're going to allow him to focus on. It's extremely rare for players who've kind of naturally played wing to be able to convert and become a center at these pro levels. But Trent and I have kind of talked about this in depth, that he's got the pedigree. He has the family who has Hall of Famer NHL bloodlines. If there's anybody who's going to be able to kind of stack up to the odds that are against him, this is kind of that profile that may be able to do that. So another reason to really keep your eye on some of these prospects as they develop, because there's certain storylines here of what may happen with these players. And of course, if Tej excels at center this season and is able to convert to center in the big leagues, that is going to be a huge win for this team, as that is a very, very difficult position to play in the NHL. Any other comments there before we move on to our defense?
Yeah, we did dive into this kind of at length in a couple of our previous pods. So Third Gen Aggie, I would definitely go back and listen to those if you haven't already. We kind of weigh in and went around and around on more detail in terms of what the immediate and long-term future for Tej Ginla holds. So I won't dive too deeply into it here in this episode, but he will be playing center this year in Kelowna. So definitely keep an eye out on that. As Brad said, we don't know if that's going to lead to him playing center in the future. Dylan Gunther, if you don't know, played center after his draft year for his junior team for the Edmonton Oil Kings. He didn't ultimately stick as a center in the pros, but things may be different for Tej Ginla. This does happen more regularly with European players. That trend had to start somewhere. If that's going to start being a trend in North America, who better than Tej Ginla to start that? So we'll keep our eyes peeled on that. We'll keep you up to date on it. 3G Aggie as the season goes on.
Awesome. Well, let's move right along to our left defense. To top off this prospect pipeline, we have Dmitry Simishev, who was drafted in the 2023 draft. He was the shocker that we took. Kind of went off the board here to grab this hulking, nearly 6'6" left defenseman who, much like Boot, skates in ways that he really shouldn't be able to. Another fun fact about him that I absolutely love is he plays chess daily, and it's just a way to keep his brain sharp. And obviously playing defense, that's a great position to be in. If we have high IQ defensemen, that means closing on gaps, being able to read the plays better. So that was something that I was really impressed by. Artem Duda, who we just dropped a whole prospect piece on in our Clean Hits Substack. So make sure you're subscribing to that to read Trent's writings about his long journey to finally get over to North America, where he'll be making his debut in the Tucson Roadrunners organization. He was a second-round pick in the 2022 draft. I know he was another shocker for me and a lot of the Arizona Coyotes fans at the time. Kind of came out of left field, but his profile is extremely interesting. Then we have another player we drafted this year, Will Scahan, another, guess what, gigantic defenseman, age 18, drafted in the second round. He'll be going to Boston College for the NCAA this season. Exciting prospect, kind of a very typical defensive defenseman, but at development camp this summer, just a month ago, kind of displayed a little bit of offensive upside. So that was really kind of interesting and exciting to see. And then Maximilian Zuber, 21 years old, 2022 6th-round draft pick, will also be in the Tucson Roadrunners organization. So thoughts on this left defense prospect pipeline? How are we thinking about the depth chart here?
Obviously, lots of promise with Dmitry Simishev. We already heard reports that he was one of the top players at Utah's prospect camp from a couple of weeks back. I think he's similar to Daniil Boot, where he's probably a year away from playing in Utah. He's going to skip Tucson. I mean, the reality is if you're playing in the KHL, you're playing in the AHL, they're kind of, KHL is probably a little bit higher. So he's not going to leave Russia to come and play in the AHL. He's going to come right over. He's going to play in Utah. He's going to probably play top 4 on that left side. Like we kind of joked about a little earlier, he's just continuing to grow. Just a big hauling defenseman on that left side. Lots of promise there. Who else do we have on that group? We had
Zuber.
Yeah, Zuber. I think he's in that category of, he came over last year after playing in Germany. He was playing in the top league there, came over to North America, kind of adjusted to that over time. Even as far back as last season when he came in, there was some speculation that he might jump right into the Coyotes lineup. Ultimately, that didn't happen, but he did get a taste of the NHL toward the end of the year there. I think he's in that group with, Kolyachonok, Soderstrom, where he's going to probably play some spot duty in the NHL this year with injuries. And then Artem Duda, similar to Maverick Lamoureux, he's just somebody who needs to play. He didn't play a lot last year, which is, disjointed year from trying to play in Maine to, coming over from Europe to getting to TMU. He just needs to play some solid playing time, but honestly, he's just another solid prospect on that left side.
And Corey, when we were putting these lists together, I believe you were a little bit higher on Zuber than Trent was, who had Skahan a little bit higher. And I have Skahan a little bit higher as well, just maybe the freshness of just being drafted and the size and the organization he's going to gets me very excited, as that's one of the top collegiate programs he could be in. So any reason why you have that hunch of what that potential of Zuber could bring? Or
I think just what he's shown already, right? He's only 21 years old. He's coming out of the German league, which is a really underrated league in Europe.
I would agree.
Played 70 games in the AHL, decent production down there, 28 points, got a chance to play in Arizona with that one game. But I mean, like I said, coming into last year, there was thinking that he might make the immediate jump to the NHL. So, and depending on how things shake out with this year with training camp with injuries, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a good chunk of games there on that bottom pair.
I agree. And I think with Zuber, he has a little bit of that Lipkin, where he's just played a very mature game ahead of his years. And despite being a bit of a later round pick, because he probably lacks some ultimate upside, a bit like Lipkin, he's just so rock solid in every facet that he's never looked out of place, regardless of how big of a jump in competition he takes, including Zuber getting, some NHL spot duty and looking great. So I think that he's a little bit lower on my list just because of sheer upside that I don't know that he possesses. I think a lot of people might say, that Skahan lacks that upside too. He's probably not going to be an offensive force either, but what Skahan is just a mean, nasty player who's just going to be a physical beast to play against. And while Zuber has got good size and he's a solid player, he does lack that just violent side to his game that I think Skahan's going to bring. So I think sometimes a particular elite or standout quality is enough for me to kind of raise you up a level, because a lot of times you can make a career on that kind of thing. And too often players who don't stand out in any one way do ultimately end up failing to stick long term. I don't know that that'll be the case with Zuber, who I do have high hopes for, but that's just a little bit of thought going into why I had Skahan rated a little bit more highly on my list.
Yeah, that's a great explanation, and something to think about, especially because I know a lot of Utah fans are probably more in tune with the NBA, with the Jazz being there. But hockey's definitely a much larger team game where lots of different players contribute in different roles. I mean, you can almost think of it more like a football team, if you will, in that capacity. Where a lot of guys who, as long as they do that thing that the coach is really needing them to do and can excel at that, can make a career out of it. I mean, Stenlund is the perfect example here, kind of a Boyd Gordon 2.0 if you're a old Coyotes fan or old NHL fan, where a guy who excels at face-offs, excels at taking shots to the body and doing all those little things that, the stars may not necessarily want to do. The guys who are on the power play aren't going to necessarily do because they need to stay a little bit fresher. And these are some of the depth guys on these charts. If they can really impress coaches by playing those roles that they're being asked to, can maybe crawl their way up through the pipeline and make that NHL impact. One of the names that really stands out from our organization that did this was Jordan Martinook, guy that a lot of people thought our organization reached the draft way back when. Took a long time to develop, kind of one of those guys who never had one of those qualities that really popped, but did everything right. And now look at him. He is on the Carolina Hurricanes. He's assistant captain, I believe. I could be wrong about that, but he's long time been on the Hurricanes, long time been a contributor on the third and fourth line, steps up when there's injuries to the top six. Always a force to play with, always a pain in the ass to play with. And I think he's absolutely a fan favorite over there, just like he was over here. So, yeah, great comments there. So, any final thoughts on that left D before we move on to our last position?
Just that I feel a lot better about it. Knowing that, well, a lot better about it than the right D, which we'll see in a minute. But just in general, knowing that Sergachev is there. Seeing Simashev is one of our top prospects, so that's great to see that the drop off from Simashev to Duda is pretty notable, right?
Yeah.
So I would love to have bolstered that a bit more. There was available players like Zeev William and Sam Dickinson that were very tempting because our overall D depth is not phenomenal on left or right, but knowing that Sergachev is a 2016 draft year, just like Keller, and he's there now anchoring that very top pair at the very top of the blue line for the foreseeable long-term future as he's locked up long-term in Utah is very heartening and makes me feel a little bit better about the idea that the D depth chart on the prospect side feels a little bit half-baked. I can tolerate it a little bit better because of Bill Armstrong's big moves on day 2 at the draft.
Agreed, but wait till you see the right hand chart.
That left-hand side is going to be, 2-3 years from now. It could be Sergachev, then Simashev, and then Artem Duda down the left side. 3 Russians. It's almost like a Russian doll down that left side.
Yeah, that's true. It's one layer after the other. Yeah.
And before we jump over to the right defense, Clean Hits contributor Kenny's got a great comment. Any left wing, center, right wing, or lefty that is lower on the depth chart in their respective position needs to immediately switch to a right-handed shot defenseman. Get ready to learn ambidextrous, buddy, because that right defense is pretty brutal. Now, don't forget, we are not counting players who have played over 25 games in the NHL. So technically, Victor Soderstrom, who was a 2019 draft, and Michael Kesselring, who is probably going to be a mainstay on the NHL club. Yes, they're very young, and they are on the right side, right defense, and would normally make up a list like this. But because of those restrictions, we couldn't even get to 4 names. So, top of the list, Maverick Lamoureux, age 19 from the 2022 draft, first round pick. Late in the first, we moved up to draft him at 29th overall with the Cassian trade with the Edmonton Oilers. He will be making, I've said this so many times, his debut in the Tucson Roadrunners organization this year, just to add to the excitement there. Thomas Lavoie was drafted this year in the 2024 draft in the 3rd round pick. He is a member of the QMJHL. And then Montana Onyebuchi, which was an undrafted player who is age 24. He has already played in the AHL and will be continuing to play down with Tucson. So, yeah, we got some problems here. And if you remember earlier, I mentioned that choice to draft Tija Ginla, a left winger, when we already have the likes of Clayton Keller and Daniil Boot on that prospect depth chart over, some right shot defensemen like Zane Perek or Carter Yakimchuk in this draft. That may be something we can think about in a little bit or down the road. If Tej is putting up 35 goals plus every year, though, it's going to be hard to think that was the wrong choice. But there's definitely some work that we and the organization need to do on the right defense.
For sure. I as far as buyer's remorse on Tija Ginla, I'm not so afraid of it, right? I think when I was creating this list, or my version of this list, when I got to the right D, and before I knew it, Montana Onyebuchi was on the list, and somehow Thomas Lavoie was number 2. And I like Lavoie. I had him in my top 50. I would have been happy with him in the second round. We got him in the third. I like Lavoie. I'd be happy to talk about him in great detail for anyone who's crazy enough to want to hear it. Let me know. But he is, a third round pick, and he's number 2 on the depth chart. So that's not great. So my immediate thought when I saw the lack of names and lack of star power on that graphic was, holy smokes, I sure hope Tij Ginla is a heck of a lot better than Zane Parekh or Carter Yakimchuk, right? That delta needs to be significant. He can't just be a little bit better than them. He's got to be a lot better than them. Otherwise, that may not be a good pick. But I started to think about that a little bit. There's some risk associated with Zane Parekh. He's poor defensively. He's very small, very skinny. He does not play a pro-style game. He's got a lot to round out, a lot to work on. Carter Yakimchuk, who I love, one of my favorite players in the draft. I had him ahead of Zane Parekh in my rankings. I did have Tij ahead of Parekh as well. Yakimchuk is got some foot speed problems. Yakimchuk is 11 months older than Tij Ginla. And those 11 months don't matter so much as the development year. He's had extra development years. He's played 3 full seasons in the WHL compared to Tij Ginla's 1.5. So what you see is closer to what you get with him, and he still has major mechanical issues in his skating stride. Those two are like purely offensive defensemen who may end up power play merchants. They may end up blue chip, top of the lineup, number 1 Ds too, but there's a lot more risk and red flags associated with those two, in my opinion, than there are with Tij Ginla, who does everything you want a hockey player to do, is absent all of the red flags and concerns as far as I'm concerned, and is a really good selection, and one that I'm not going to hold against anyone, even if our depth continues to be an issue on defense, especially because Tij is going to be in the NHL in a couple of years. Defensemen take longer to develop, right? Zane Parekh and Carter Yakimchuk, who have things they need to work on in their games, are going to take even longer to develop. I would argue that by the time they hit their top potential, guys like Clayton Keller and Sergachev are going to be 30, 31 years old, and the window is going to start closing on their best years. So it almost feels a little bit like our last chance to draft a defenseman who is going to be a huge part of that core was Simishev, and that the draft is probably not the way we're going to address this problem, just from a timing factor, and timing how everything's going to come together as we pull out of this rebuild. I think a trade like we saw for Sergachev was really smart and makes a ton of sense. And makes it so that we didn't have to draft for need and bypass the view of BPA, that our scouts, our highly heralded scouting department and management department who have made their careers in the draft, don't have to take guys lower on their list simply for need. So I guess that's what I wanted to spit out as far as the buyer's remorse on Tij. I don't have it. I'm not going to develop it. I'm happy with the pick, and I will stand by that.
And I think just the other thing on the right side is it's almost Maverick Lemmer or bust. We're really banking on him turning out, and really good player. But as I mentioned previously, this is somebody who just needs to play. He missed a lot of time. He had a bout of mono that took him out. He had the shoulder injury last year that he missed the entire Q playoffs. He missed the Memorial Cup. He hasn't played more than 40 games in the last 2 years. I think he had 35 and then he had 39. Now, he did make a step up offensively last year, which was kind of the one piece of his game to really round out. He went from 19 points to 33 points, so he did get that next level. But the other thing with him, I mean, aside from playing, is he just needs to fill out. He's big, he's lanky, he's kind of awkward. I think he's 6'7", 215, about that size, so just still needs to fill out that bigger frame. I remember last year there was reports he was eating 4,600 calories a day to try and get that weight up. Starting the day, two cheeseburgers for breakfast, so not a bad way to start the day. Just really trying to get that weight up. Missing time on the ice from all the injuries, and that's just the thing with him, right? He needs to play. He's going to get a chance to go pro here with Tucson, which is going to be another challenge for him and in transitioning to the pro league. So really banking on him to turn out. Still lots of promise, but there's risk there as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It was kind of, as I was writing my profile on Lamoureux for the top under 25 years old prospects, which we have on our Clean Hits Substack, I was kind of taken aback by the amount of games missed. It was easy to kind of not think about it after we drafted him and knowing he had missed that time, but then seeing it happen again and again, it definitely adds up. And especially with how promising he was looking at the start of last season and even in development camp last year. I know he was turning a lot of heads, but sometimes those things just completely go away. And like you mentioned, it's really could just be a matter of building up that frame. And luckily there's a lot of great Mexican food in Tucson.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And, you could think about it a little bit if you wanted to be like an ultra optimist, like a delusional optimist, that he's most of like the major work that he's needed has been off ice. He's got to fill out. He's a team player, right? So he's had a lighter on ice schedule. Not for the reasons you want. It's not load management, but it is injuries. But he has had the ability to eat those 2 cheeseburgers a day for breakfast, hit the gym hard, and pack on the LBs with a little bit of a lighter playing schedule. So if you think of him almost like an NCAA player, where there's a big emphasis on off-ice training and off-ice development with a lighter games played schedule, if you squint a little bit and use your imagination somewhat, it almost looks like he's had an NCAA type schedule and workload from a games perspective. And he's packed on a ton of weight, a ton of lean muscle, which is what we really wanted. Now he's ready to turn pro. He's a little bit more physically ready for it. And, being a 6'7" lanky defenseman from the junior leagues, he was probably going to have to spend a decent amount of time in the AHL anyway. So he may not be quite as off track as we fear. But he's probably not quite as on track as we hope. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle for Mav Lam. He's the most likable kid you can imagine. So we're all going to be rooting for him and hoping for the best. And I can't wait to get down to Tucson and sample some of that fine Mexican food you referenced, Brad, and get our eyes on Mav Lam and report back to the Clean Hits crew just how he looks down there in the old Pueblo.
Awesome. Any final thoughts on kind of the right-hand defense, the prospect pipeline here, or should we close that chapter?
Biggest
I'm good on that. Well, let's skip goalies because I have no idea they're voodoo. I don't know. I'm convinced that anyone who purports to be a goalie expert is actually a liar, and anyone who has a proven track record of success scouting goalies is just a very lucky liar. That's my opinion. So, because I don't know how it works. I don't know how anyone can watch, tell, understand, predict, and project. It seems like magic to me. And you never know. The best goalie prospects often don't pan out. And even once they get to the NHL, sometimes they have an elite level season, and then you never hear from them again. So, not a position I was ready to spend a lot of time breaking down here today.
Yeah. Just don't burn first round picks on them.
Please.
Agreed. I don't mind early seconds, don't mind second round, third round, etc. But you can't go with the first anymore.
I think DA is doing it right with that. He got himself Michael Robel, who would be at the top of that depth chart for the goalies if we managed to create a graphic. He's progressing very nicely at UMass, and just a very nice place to select that goalie there in the second round. And bet on those tools. You can't go wrong. Good program, good tools, good track record. A lot of high hopes for Robel. And look at that. I talked about a goalie anyway, even though I promised I wouldn't.
And you look at what the Utah team has right now for the goalies, right? One claimed off waivers and one pulled out of Europe. So that just shows you don't need to use the draft picks on goalies. You can find them in other ways. Both of them were for free.
Yeah, we kind of have a money ball philosophy with them.
Hits. And that's what you need to do, because the teams that do burn really good at draft assets on goalies, a lot of times really great goalies were drafted in the first round, but usually they're really great goalies for some team other than the one that put the first round pick on them, because they take so long to develop. There's so few roster spots available. You might pick a goalie in the first round and he might turn out to be a great player, but it's probably not going to be for you.
Are you hinting at Askarov and Nashville?
Exactly. Another great example. He's probably going to be a great goalie, Probably not for Nashville.
And both Vejmelka and Ingram were Nashville picks.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Crazy. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for joining. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for all your support. I want to give another shout out to one of our favorite Utah podcasts, SLC Puck. He's doing some fun things too. So make sure you give him a follow or make sure you're watching his show. Also want to thank you guys for all taking your time to listen, engaging with us, having fun with us, sending us great questions. We do have a Discord. If you go to our Twitter account at Clean Hits Hockey, we do have a link in our bio that will get you to all of our different communities that we're building. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We all love this team so much. We all have grown up loving this team, and we want to just kind of help spread the information about the team, why we love it so much, why we love what Bill Armstrong is building here. And most importantly, we want to have fun watching and being a fan with all of you as well. So help us continue to make the community around the Utah Hockey Club grow. Feel free to subscribe to our Substack, which will have all of our written content. That is cleanhits.substack.com, soon to be cleanhitshockey.com as well. You can find us on Twitter. Like I mentioned, we're on Instagram, Spotify, Apple. It's getting the list is getting long, but we are there. And we got you covered for all of your Utah Hockey Club information and content. I am Brad. This was Corey and Trent as well from the Clean Hits crew. Unfortunately, Kenny couldn't make it today, but we love you, Kenny, and we can't wait to have you on an episode soon. And we had one segment that we didn't quite get to, which was going to be ranking the top 12 Utah hockey players and prospects under the age of 25, which I think maybe we should just turn into maybe a little quick hits episode this weekend or sometime soon. So keep your eyes peeled on that when we go live for it. Otherwise, you guys have anything else you want to say?
Have a great weekend.
See you till later.
Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Bye.
Who's running the game now?